All right. Welcome in, Gil. Hey, everybody. All right. It is 12:04 my time. I'd like to kick off our community session now, led by Christos. Christos is here to share with us about AI engineering with Cursor. He is going to be sharing his insights and his research with us. He is welcoming questions. We'll be taking questions in the chat as well as at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to share your thoughts with him along the way. We will have time to ask him any follow-up questions post presentation. Another cool tidbit, Christos will be presenting this talk at GitHub this week. So this is a great way for him to practice presenting to a technical audience. And so again, we'd love your feedback and your insights. And with that, Christos, over to you, my friend.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is a topic that I've been very interested in personally and excited about because the time is ripe for using these AI native tools to leverage for our own development, for building, for our creativity. So in the last few weeks, I had the opportunity to speak with some of my peers, and through some research on the topic, as well as my own experience and recollection and sort of processing, distilling the information that I learned, as well as those from my peers, colleagues, and mentors and research, I put together a blog post and some slides to present to all of you. So hopefully it's useful. And without further ado, let's get started. So first things first, AI engineering with Cursor. What is Cursor? Cursor is a integrated development environment. It is a fork of VS Code. So the most common IDE with AI native capabilities, which means that when you're writing code, it can give you suggestions for autocomplete. It can give you explanations of what code does, how it works. It can make corrections. It can give edits. So if you say in natural language, I'd like to add this module, I'd like to add this method to the function. I'd like to change it from one language to another potentially, so that you as a Python developer understand some piece of JavaScript more easily. That's something that you can do. We have the capabilities now to do all of these things and have a hyper awareness of the context of our code, which is really exciting. And I think the thing that Cursor does much better than working in ChatGPT or working with the API UI is that you're going to get this context awareness. So in your development environment, you have the IDE indexing your code. You allow it to. We'll talk about settings and stuff like that later. But it has this context that's very much needed to answer the questions that you're going to end up asking, to make the suggestions and the edits that you want to make. So what are the best practices when developing with these AI native tools? You're going to want to start out with templates. So for a new project, you might start out with a JavaScript, Node.js, or a Python fast API kind of starter framework, the packages that you might want to use, and just have that in mind. And before even getting started, you kind of want to think about what you're going to do. You kind of want to plan out what you have in mind and kind of write that down in a markdown. We'll get to that later on, but you're going to want to then break that down into manageable, smaller components that the AI chat or suggestion will be able to answer, and will be able to help you complete one at a time. And that way, you're not giving it all of these tasks to do at once. I know that I get overwhelmed when I have to do that. And so the LLM is no different. With the right context, with a simple task, it's just making putts. It's just knocking things in and doing it the way that you expect, which is what you want. You want to maintain this comprehensive context. And like I said, by making putts, you want to have the output be very expected, structured, reliable. And what we want to avoid is not having any hallucinations, not having the code that we generate be spaghetti code or something that just doesn't make any sense. And then downstream, when you're parsing out this JSON, having it validated. And by validated, we mean, we'll get to what it means, but the expected schema, so that we can handle it with code programmatically. So the first best practice, planning ahead, you're going to want to have the packages that you're going to want to use in mind. So just getting started, if you are a backend developer, you're going to use Fast API and Pydantic, and you know that you're going to want to use those packages. Maybe you know for sure that there's an LLM that you have in mind. So either OpenAI, or you want to use a Hugging Face model, and you're going to want to have those packages as well as the documentation for those packages available and ready to go. Then what you're going to do is you're going to put those into a documentation into your notes. So just kind of like have the link, write that down, kind of like a checklist of what you're going to do. And from there, you can break down that into detailed steps. We can talk about that later. But for every change that you make, you're going to hopefully make a Git commit as well. So every time you have a change in your code, every time you ask a question to the LLM and it makes a suggestion and makes a change, commit that. And that way you can go back and keep a version control process. There's one thing I was going to mention, which is not listed, but what you might want to do is have sort of like a rough sketch, even because now the models have the capabilities to use images. So if you have a sketch or system diagram for the back end, or a wireframe for the front end, you want your component here and here. The AI has been trained to actually output code in a way that uses the instruction from those images, and it does quite a good job, actually. So something to keep in mind. Going back to when I mentioned context, Cursor uses your code base, and it's very important when you are prompt engineering, when you are using these LLMs, to give it not as much context as possible, but the right amount of context, the most relevant amount of context. When we're doing RAG applications, we know that we need to retrieve the most similar. In this case, we need to retrieve the right pieces of code. And what you want to opt for is you want to kind of explicitly say, use this function and then cite it and reference it, and then it knows to use that piece of code. So what we're going to do when we create these projects is we're going to explicitly say what we're going to use, the documentation of how to do it, and then that way there's really no room for error. So with Cursor, using these rules for AI, what you're able to do is give it some more instructions. So maybe a tone or some sort of general guidance, but where you can get really specific is when you use the cursor rules file, and we'll maybe get that get to that later in a demo. But what it does is gives it sort of a project specific system prompt to say you are an expert in Flask or Fast API or TypeScript, whatever the role is, so that it kind of narrows the scope of work to the specific project that you're working on, and it doesn't go outside of what you're trying to accomplish. So that's really helpful. Kind of going back to when I was saying referencing the code, you're able to reference files, folders, external documentation, which is really nice. Different Git repositories or potentially PRs. I'm not sure if you can do PRs. You can have it search the web. You can have it reference other chats that you have. So if you're having a conversation and then you kind of like you're using with ChatGPT, you can go back and reference another conversation. Your own definitions, so maybe terms that are potentially ambiguous, just kind of clearly defining what you mean by accurate. So having a definition and then pasting any links to blogs or articles, maybe somebody shows how they implemented something. So really important. I spend a good amount of time talking about context. Context is king, and probably the most important thing to consider when you are prompt engineering. So what's important when you're prompt engineering, it's really just this first bullet point. Be specific, clear, and detailed. And that epitomizes everything else. You're going to want to define exactly what you're looking for the LLM to output. So you're going to want to define a scheme. You can play around with it. You don't have to think about this too long. You can just say, have it output this. Actually, no, check that, revise it, actually have it output something else. So you don't need to have it be perfect on the first go, but you do eventually want to get to the point where you are getting more detailed and specific about the outputs that you're requesting the LLM to make for your code. Yeah, and then within that, kind of when I was saying referencing the docs, you can, in your cursor rules, in your at docs, you can add these docs to your cursor project. So let's say your Fast API, you want to add the Fast API docs, or you want to add your own project. So referencing that. And then what you can do inside the documentation is add specific example code. So you want to add something that's as close as possible to what you're trying to generate, but kind of in the way that you're trying to implement it with your own notes. And that's going to get you the best result. So it's really all about diligence and explicitness and making it super simple. Speaking of outputs, your number one takeaway recommendation for any tool to use, just use it, whether you believe me or not, is going to be Pydantic. Pydantic for output validation. It is it's going to save you a lot of headache. It takes the prompts that you're going to make LLM calls with, and it ensures that they come back in the schema. The JSON comes back in the schema that you expected, and you'll see maybe in a demo and an explanation what that looks like. But it makes everything downstream that we were talking about much easier to handle programmatically, and there's nothing unexpected. So the structure is as expected. There's no malformed JSON. It is going to be the only variability is within the values of the JSON itself. So some of the things that we mentioned kind of before concluding, we're using Python, we're using Pydantic to ensure a valid schema compliant output. We're using Fast API for simple deployment of APIs. And then what we're here today to learn about, Cursor, real-time AI powered coding support. And then this is just to kind of hype you guys up. What do we want to build? Maybe we can spend this time thinking about some of the projects that you might be interested in building, or questions that you have about the tool, any things that are holding you back. And we just want to squash those and say that, now is a time like no other, where we can leverage these tools to supercharge our creativity. And so that's kind of what I'd like to leave you with. And oops, that's the wrong button. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this presentation. I will start with one question that I see in the chat about Cursor AI versus GitHub Copilot. I think that GitHub Copilot is really nice, but it actually is just a plugin. It's just one feature, which is auto-completion. So Cursor is a superset of auto-completion with everything else. I think GitHub Copilot doesn't really, although it does consider the context in the files of your local development environment, it's not going to be able to make edits in place. And I think for the rest of the session, we can kind of play around and see what some of the capabilities are and have a discussion about what we think. But there's so many more features, and just having that context awareness and is going to be huge. Zach, are there smaller files or a few larger files better? If smaller, can you identify? I would say that kind of like clear instructions are important first, and then yes, like the fewer files, the better, Zach. You definitely don't want to overload your context window with different things. You kind of want to just have your instructions of what you're looking for, maybe how it interconnects with what you're trying to connect it to, and then that's about it. So just whatever you as the developer think is relevant, because at the end of the day, you're the boss. This is the co-pilot. It's not, you don't want to like hand off a task and have it just run on its own. We're getting to that point where that's more possible. But yeah, you're in charge. So you, at your own discretion, Replit agent can automate deployment. Does Cursor have agent capabilities? I don't think it does. So yeah, there's going to be different tools that you're going to want to leverage. So using V0 for your UI is probably the best bet, because it is integrated with Vercel, and yeah, you can deploy it from there. So if you have a project, you want to maybe start out with V0, and then use Cursor for functions and kind of developing your backend, developing the entire thing. You can take the code from V0, plop it into Cursor. There's no, it's not really one or the other, unless you're kind of considering Cursor or GitHub Copilot, because I think you can't use one. You can't use both. How do you generate instructions for the start of your project? Do you make a PRD or more like a complete sequence list of tasks? Do you use a one for this? Yes, Zach. So you do create sort of like a template. I can send you the video that I watched and I can recreate it, or I can send you the video, or both. But I think during this time we can potentially kind of just like walk through a project of kind of how to implement these best practices. Haven't done this step by step really, but we can on the fly walk through how this is done. So the first thing is you're going to want to take a template of this instructions, right? So you mentioned PRD, here's the PRD outline, and you're going to start filling these things in. So I don't really know what project we want to do. We could come to a consensus, or we can just use something general. Probably a fast API app that has a RAG component. Sure. Anyone have, this is collaborative, this is live. Does anyone have an idea?
What about just do like a customer service triage agent? So yeah, something like that.
Yes.
Because everybody wants to do that.
So true.
Customer service triage agent. Okay, and then it's going to be a fast API app that uses RAG to answer questions. Okay. And then we're probably going to want to include packages. Sure. And then one thing that we can consider, like within Cursor for this context. So generally, like if your company has typical guidelines, you might want to put those into the rules for AI. But for the most part, you probably want to create one of these. And this is kind of the same idea that we're using with this instructions. And then you can reference it, right? So if we want to use these instructions, we can include them as context here. That's kind of how this works. So what's going on here? Real quick, this is Cursor. This is the terminal. So you can do cool things in here where, like, in line, you can add this to the chat. You can edit. You can say add Pydantic. We definitely want Pydantic. Boom, add Pydantic. So it, if it's more complicated, then it would do, some more non-trivial work for you, but that's kind of the idea. So this might be like a subheader. And then what you're going to actually want to do with this core functionalities is say number one, yes, exactly. And then the documentation is going to be like Pydantic docs. And then you're going to want to add exactly, example code. See, it's doing so many suggestions for me. Blah, blah, blah. Python, yes. And I didn't even need to grab this because it knows Pydantic, but this is kind of how you'd approach it. So for each one of these, you'd add the docs. You can also add this. So let's say you wanted to add a doc. Add new doc. Pydantic. Right? So here's Pydantic docs. And now you can reference Pydantic docs like that. Boom. Referenced. Features. Let's see here. Data. Where's the cursor? Rules. I'll look at my keys. Cursor. Indexing. Oh, okay. So a couple of quick things now we're looking through here. This is indexed, so everything is embedded and sorted. So it has the reference to these files. And you can add cursor ignore. So you say, yo, don't look at my env. And it's the same as get ignore. But like especially things that maybe you have a bunch of like style sheets or like the node modules, right? I think this is one of the examples. So you like ignore that. You don't have any, but for example, no, don't say it. So for each one of these documents that you're going to add, you're going to have the document page, and then you're going to give an example, and then maybe it makes a mistake. So you'd want to put that like edge case here as well. And this is just to kind of, narrow what the output is going to look like. PRD, do you use one? Do you still have these kinds of talks for working? No, companies are only for green. I'm not sure what greenfield means, but current file structure. So this current file structure, we're going to want it to grab we're going to want to grab like a fast API template. Oops. Let me find it. Template, GitHub. Right, so then we can git clone that, and let's say that we've cloned that, and just for the purposes of time, I'm not going to actually do it. I'm just going to copy this command, cd into cursor, and then now we're in here. So ls, these are all the files, and then you can use the tree. So you grab this, you grab this structure. This would obviously be more stuff, but then you'd put it in here as sort of a class, that, and then this. Sure, you could add some more stuff, but then what you're going to be able to do is then take this instructions and refine it. So through a process of we plan it, we come up with the outline, then we grab the packages that we need, then we ask the AI above as a project we want to build, how should I structure the project file? And then you kind of show this example from something that you grab, a template. And then you ask it, what's still missing? What's still missing? What should I add? Please fill in the details for this PRD. And I think Zach mentioned using a model like O1, which has a longer inference time. So it does a little bit more of that thinking about including all the components is going to be helpful. But ultimately, check everything. Very important. And then that's going to be your basis for the project. So to build this in or something. Yeah, to do exactly. So boom, now we have instructions, and you can also have cursor rules. So cursor rules is essentially the same thing, and you can grab one of these awesome cursor rules. Why? Because it's awesome. And so one of those cursor rules might, you can, there's a couple directories, I can link these, but there's a whole bunch of them that have these really nice prompts for the LLM. And we'll add one of those. I think the one that we want to add is oops. And so this is just going to be yet another guide for your LLM to follow. for Fast API specifically. And there now every time you ask a question, it's going to follow these guidelines because your cursor rules is in this root of the directory, like so. And so now we're ready to go. Now we're ready to let's see. We want to add the instructions. We want to add the dot cursor. I think the dot cursor rules is automatically included, but just to show what is the first step to building this customer service triage agent. And now it's churning. Now it has first let's create the proper directory. Yes, so we need to fill this out. And so now you have sort of an example, and what you're going to want to do is simplify this as much as possible, create as few files as possible, follow some of the other best practices, use well-documented packages that are going to make Cursor is able to, from your guidance, do things one task at a time. So instead of chain of thought, you have this chain of tasks. So telling it to do things in a list and not doing not doing the subsequent task before the prerequisite task. Like so, and what's really cool is you can add these changes directly into your file like this. So if this is what we want, we can add another file with the code there, and you just start building out your project. There's kind of a lot to take in and consider right now. So I will, what website was that? Let me just share.
Yeah, Christos, are you going to be able to share all the resources from this talk with everybody?
Yeah, I'll just share it. I'll just share the whole thing.
Awesome.
So here's my super set of resources for this project, and that's going to include Cursor blog, some of their docs on indexing, some of the walkthroughs on YouTube, and actually this one is really helpful. I'll link this one directly for just practical examples, like just the features in Cursor that are going to be kind of your bread and butter of like what you're going to be using every time. So that includes the chat. That include with if you do Control L, it opens a chat or opens the chat. Control K if you're here. So let's say you want to make a change. Add a descriptive comment. Enter. And there it is. As a descriptive comment. So you can make changes in line. You can, what's really awesome is you can say git commit to a new branch. So it knows the terminal, it knows all these different languages. And if you're really clear and keeping it simple, like one step at a time, one task at a time, it has all these capabilities. So think of your entire project. Think of as you're working through and changing these files, you can add them to a commit and have the AI also come up with a descriptive message for that commit that you're making. And then you can also like in this instruction, update a to-do list. So maybe you have a to-do list of the things that you need to do. You want to be very explicit about what needs getting done. And then you say, please do step one. Did you do step one correctly? Are you sure? And so be like really being over the top, and that annoying friend will ensure that you don't have any headache of getting stuck in a loop and getting some error that you don't know how to fix, and then having AI explain the error, which it does very well, but then it's kind of stuck doing the same thing because you've put it in a position where it made up something and it thinks it's right. So those are the best practices, and we can kind of continue on this path. I think this is pretty vague project, so I'll just kind of stop here and continue to take questions or open sort of a dialogue of what people have used Cursor for so far and any questions or things that they might want to work on. But I think for now, that kind of completes the presentation. Sarah?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christos. This was great. For those of you who are just joining or joining a little bit late, Christos just gave us a great talk and a demo. He did share all the resources in the chat, so feel free to check those out. If you all have feedback for Christos will be giving this talk again later on this week. He's looking for feedback and ways that he can improve. Or if you have questions about the technology that he shared, feel free to unmute and jump in. We're ready for open discussion time now.
Yes, exactly. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah,
I'll be presenting it tomorrow if anyone is in San Francisco or nearby.
Nice.
Come hang out.
Awesome.
Did someone say something?
You guys going to call on people, or are we just going to talk willy-nilly? How would you like to?
You're up, Flop. Willy-nilly.
Nice. All right, cool. So honestly, I haven't used Cursor as extensively as now seeing I probably should have. I've been using V0 definitely. But Claude has been my go-to for most of the coding questions I've had. It's done a pretty good job, but I like the way I've always missed what Cursor is able to do in Claude. So I think I'm going to jump over into that actually right after the talk. So thanks for that. So you were asking for Spears regarding your presentation and the content. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. Love any form of feedback, written, verbal.
Okay.
Emoji.
All right, and this this presentation, what's your goal with this presentation? Are you trying to explain what Cursor is, or are you trying to get more people to use Cursor?
I would say that the audience tomorrow is there for AI and computer vision, and it's sort of a meetup. So I would like the content that I'm presenting to be useful, informative. I think probably a lot of people have used Cursor. That might be a big assumption. So it is somewhere between what is Cursor for people who don't know, but it's more best practices for things to consider, because a lot of us who write code with AI tools, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, or actually have started using Cursor already, will just get up and running. And if we take a step back and we have a project in mind, I've come to realize that it's actually better to keep things super simple and like not take too many steps before checking what direction you're going in. So it's easier to course.
Are you presenting this as a subject matter expert, or are you presenting this as one of the guys?
That's a good question. I would say that I'm presenting it as one of the guys.
Okay. All right.
Like a
I got you. Well, the reason why I was asking, because if you were presenting it as a subject matter expert, I would practice my preamble a little bit. Don't apologize or downplay where you and how you got the information. Fact is, you got the information and other people didn't. So there's value in that, and don't forget that. Sounded like you were apologizing ahead of the presentation.
Okay, good.
Now, would you prefer I send you notes, or do we have time to talk about it?
Oh, both.
Okay. So the animations in your presentation, they're really cool. I actually love them a lot. Give the eye something to follow. Did you make those yourself, or were those something you found?
This is Canva, so it's tangent. Let's just go into it. I mean, Canva's cool. I think Sarah actually put me onto Canva. There's a couple templates in here.
Okay, and you're using the templates as part of the presentation. Is that correct?
That's right. So the graphics are all included. I
Nice.
wrote this blog and then kind of fit the content of the blog to answer some of these questions. Like, what is cursor?
Are you going to be presenting this on stage or in a Zoom meeting?
On stage.
Okay, I would just make sure your animations aren't clipping. I don't know if that was connection based or if anybody else is experiencing that. I was seeing some clipping on the gear, for example, not on this slide. I think it was the next slide. It was in the context slide, actually.
All of the
Right there.
It might be your connection because all the animations were clear for me at least.
Okay, perfect. Yep. And if I do sound rushed, it's because I want to respect everybody's time and I don't want to be like the only person talking. So if I cut you off or anything like that, it's not because I'm trying to be rude. It's just I have 12 points written down. I want to get through them all if there's value in it.
Oh, please get through all. Yeah, this is great.
So disregard the animation. The examples you gave, so during the presentation itself, so when you were going through the slides, you were giving a lot of examples and you were using a lot of your hands to gesture. Sorry, I don't have my camera on, and I'm just.
Yes, I understand what you're
gesturing now. You were doing a lot of gestures with your hands. You were saying, something over here and then something over there, and that's great and all. But if I'm trying to explain something, I find it's most productive if I have visuals accompanying the explanation. While the animations are nice, they're cool, they're interesting, there's something for the eye to follow. If you're talking about very specific examples like you were, bring relevant content on the screen to it. If you're talking about two separate windows, bring those two separate windows on the screen as well. It will help people be find the information you're giving more relevant and add meaning to it in their own way. This may just because I'm slow, but I didn't really understand what you were talking about.
You are right. I should not use my hands. I should use my slides. Yep. And I should just kind of let people digest it while I talk about it and use enthusiasm to make sure that they stay attentive.
Nice. The examples you were giving, while they were important, you seemed very unsure about the examples you were giving, so you tended to condense them down in multiple iterations until you were almost happy, or you were workshopping them on the fly.
Yes.
Repeat your presentation multiple times until you're confident with the examples. Make a script. Right? This is my presentation. Here's a script. It'll enable you to condense the time down. It will give you the ability to manage your time and, of course, be respectful to other people's time and interruptions. And I think you'll get a lot more productivity out of it because you'll know exactly where you're going with it and get your point across more effectively.
Thank you. I completely agree. I'm going to add some. I think there's like a presenter view. So potentially when I do present, I'll run with whatever I get, but ideally I'll be able to kind of like share one screen and then have the presenter view. And then hopefully the presenter view will have some notes that I can, like you said, script.
Are you a practiced presenter, or is presenting in this scope something that's new to you?
More the latter. Okay. I have some experience presenting my hackathon projects. Okay. And I just realized that I have a somewhat more natural ability to do it, but I'm not practiced.
So natural ability is great. It'll get you started. Yes. The real crux and the real key to getting your point across, especially in the presentation format, and again, this is just my experience, practice your speech at least 100 times and tell it to anybody who'll listen. You should be talking about this in your sleep.
in my sleep.
because then you can start having fun with it, right? Let me see here. Yep. Then when you're giving information, so you had some moments where you were giving extra tidbits of information which were helpful and valuable, but when you give tidbits of information and then follow that up with, I think, I'm not sure, maybe, you're invalidating your entire presentation, because now how do I know that the rest of your information is I think, I'm not sure, maybe, right?
Yes.
So if you have examples, research the shit out of them. Be confident in what you say and stand by what you say. And that ties back into practicing the script that you then associate with it, because then you know what you're talking about. And I don't care if your mother-in-law comes to you and tries to make you insecure about something, you can tell her to go to hell because you know your shit.
I thought I was muted.
No apologies, no hesitation, no invalidation.
Richard G put in the comments, be uncertain confidently.
Exactly.
Love that, Richard.
Nice.
I just want to,
my
Fluffball, I know you have a couple more, but just while we still have some
Yeah,
folks in
sure.
the call, I just want to call out some things in the chat. It says, so we got one thing from John Wanisk. Okay. If you're doing a talk tomorrow at a computer vision meetup, I recommend your project to be write the code that implements fine-tune a CSV model. Fine-tune a CSV model.
But by the way, that's John Disk. I don't mean to be
Okay.
confusing.
John Disk. Hey.
John
So is
Disk,
there anything
yeah.
else you wanted to add to your comment so Christo can get some feedback from you?
Well, I was just thinking that would be applicable. It's something he could practice ahead of time, and would probably be able to show proof of concept really quick.
Mm-hmm.
So
the demo, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, to demo project creation, I bet you could roll out the code real quick, and people there would know right off the bat that that's going to work, even if you don't, do the training or have time for that.
Right.
Dude, awesome. That's 0.9 on my list. I'm just going to scratch that off.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah, a couple of things before feedback. I put an emphasis on finishing this blog post to then hype up this event to then hype up the next event. So this is fresh, and I'm glad I'm getting feedback right away. I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Well, like I said, I hope I'm not stealing everybody's time, because there's no pause button with me. I get very out half of this.
It's okay.
I think everything that
cut me off.
said during the session has been informative to all of us.
Yeah.
Unless, thumbs down if you disagree, but
no, it's okay. We got a little bit more feedback from Gil. I'm just going to read this to you, Christo, since Gil's still with us. His notes were great presentation, a few notes. Make the font bigger when on VS Code. So again, zoom in to that when you're doing it. Leave thank you slide for the end. No need to show it before the cursor demo. I think that is a good point too. And then sometimes you went back to the Google Doc to check on details. You should make slides for any of those explanations or steps. The slides are your guide. Anything else, Gil, that you want to add in? I know that you just wrapped up a demo day a couple weeks ago, so I know presenting's top of mind for you.
No, well, it was really informative. I was thinking maybe if you can add some screenshots whenever you are referring to something that is not on the screen, you can get rid of the animation and add the screenshot so that people get the idea. They don't have to guess what is it that you're talking about. That's it. That's really good.
Yeah, I think I'll probably, like you're saying, whenever I do refer to something, instead of waving my hands, I'll do one of these, and I'll have some example code from whatever resource that I'm speaking about, just up for people to quickly review. What do I mean by beyond API and UI capabilities? Well, UI capabilities is the ChatGPT or Claude, so directly asking questions in Claude. And API is when you use the OpenAI API and ask the LLM a question. So having it directly here in the chat or having it directly make a suggestion, like it's, adding this app folder. That's what I mean.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Fluffball, back to you.
All right. Yeah. So two of the points have been said, like they said, just quick. The examples are great. Make sure to have one ready to go. Try, if you are going to create an example with the audience to try to engage them, have a guideline set out to where if you get low feedback because people are afraid to speak up, that you can get them started and the ball flowing. Worst
Right.
case, you can do the example yourself because you've done it 100 times. Yeah. The script, yeah. So the presentation, I wonder, would it make sense to integrate the coding demonstration inside the presentation so that you have it more of a interactive thing? Is like, hey, this is cursor, this is what we do. And also here, now I'm going to show you a little bit about what we do, and we'll move on to the next slides and talk about it, and then show it in action in the demo, and then create a correlation between what you're saying and what you're doing or what you're showing for the people to then be able to say, make up their own opinion, which will then tie into, hey, at the end of your slides, you did mention, hey, if you have ideas or what you want to do or get excited about it, right? What is it? Something in sales is, don't tell me what to think. Let me ask you what to do next. Right? In other words, get me to the point where I'm excited enough to want to do the next step, and I'm the one asking you for more. Right? And that's kind of when you're putting your money where your mouth is by saying, hey, so this is the theory, and this is what it looks like in practice. You're reducing that time to dopamine, which means you're making it more engaging and easier for people to retain information and then really get excited about it because they're instantly seeing learning, and then that learning in action, and it makes you feel good about yourself, and so it gets people engaged. Lastly, on your presentation, and you already did this mid-talk with regarding the Google Drive, make some kind of a notebook in the end. Say, hey guys, everything we talked about is right here, freely available. Here are the links. Here's the resources, and if you want to see our example, just go to my GitHub and grab it. Right? Perfect. Give them something to chew on and revisit the talk, and it will create relevance for you as well. And in the interest of build, ship, and share, it will give you something to share in the end as well.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Those
Build, ship, share. Thank you so much, Fluffball. That was great.
Amazing.
That was phenomenal. Yes, I believe Christos at the end. Christos will share with me all the links. I will share the recording, the slides. He already shared the documents, but I'll put it together in a nice little post in the Build Ship Share channel following the thread where we announced his session. So folks can go back and check out all the resources there. We are just about at time. Does anybody else have any other questions or feedback for Christos? Feel free to unmute if you do.
If not, big high five to Fluffball and Gil and everyone else for the amazing feedback and for your time, for joining us today. Thank you so much. A special shout out to Sarah. She's awesome. Thank you for helping me and putting this together.
Got you, man. Got your back. All right. Well, that is going to wrap up. Thank you so much, Christos, for coming and presenting. Before you all leave, if any of you would like to host a community session, maybe you're giving a talk, or maybe you're working on a project and you want to get feedback from the community or share something you're working on, or maybe even just demo live and talk with people about this thing that you're geeking out about, shoot me a DM. I'm Sriracha. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, and I'd be happy to set up a session for you to come and share it with the community. And with that, keep building, shipping, and sharing, and we'll do the same. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Christos. Bye, everyone.